It's the end of the day with Ray. Hello, my friends. Well, I'm still at Impact, and I'm talking with Mike Lepper. Mike Lepper is a Senior Vice President for Impact Network. And I want to talk a little bit with Mike because I think a lot of folks in the industry don't realize the responsibility that these Senior Vice Presidents have in a company that's goal is to be $500 million in revenue. And they're well on their way. But Mike, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
Yeah. Appreciate you having me on, Ray.
Well, you know, Mike, we were talking a while back, and I was, when you think about our industry, a lot of these print dealers that are trying to transition into IT, and they're maybe a 10 or $15 million company.
Yeah.
And after talking with you, I started realizing, man, there's some market vice presidents, senior vice presidents that have budgets that are bigger than probably 10 of these guys put together in Cal. So let's start out with that. So tell us a little bit about your role here at Impact. How many people are underneath you, and what is your budget?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as far as my role of being a senior VP, I oversee our region is downtown Chicago, then the western suburbs. So we have a location in Bolingbrook, all the way down to central Illinois, LaSalle, Peru area, which I know you're familiar with, and then Hammond and Indianapolis. So that makes up half of the Midwest region for Impact, and then we have stuff north of O'Hare, up into Wisconsin. But my role is to oversee 3 general managers, which they have 8 sales managers under them, with teams of account executives and SDRs that report into them, and we have the whole structure built out, and we're about a $100 million operation for my region.
Wow, so $100 million operation, total employees that are underneath your umbrella.
Yeah, that's roughly 100
people.
In total.
Wow, and then you report direct to Tom, right?
That's correct, yep.
That's pretty amazing. They talked a lot about transitioning. There's a lot of stuff going on at Impact. It's a ever-evolving company in order to stay, relevant, I guess, if you will. How has it been? You've been here for a long time, and from where you started to where you are now, have you reached your expectations or far exceeded them?
Yeah, I would say far exceeded. I've always seen the vision here at Impact, graduating college in 2010 and starting here as entry-level sales and knocking on doors, making 50 to 100 cold calls on a daily basis and trying to churn copiers up and down the street. That's still a portion of our business, but it's a totally different way that we do it today. But I think the vision has always been there. It's just we've exceeded our expectations, and we're continuing to grow on that. I think we've reached heights that we maybe never thought we could get to, but always had the vision of getting there. And we're continuing to climb. So we have a saying, and embrace the climb at Impact, and there's no better time than the present to be here.
Well, I've talked in the past with some of the folks here, and we understand the assessments, and they're all fee-based. You don't do anything for nothing and all that stuff. But if you look at some of your senior reps that are underneath you, what's the average revenue that they would bring in a year?
Yeah, that's a great question. So average revenue for a senior rep, a monthly budget for them is right around $500,000. On a monthly basis. So you take that and multiply it by 12, you're looking at $600,000 or $6 million in total transactions or total reoccurring revenue that they're looking at from a budget perspective. So I remember being here an account executive, and the $1 million club was a big thing, especially for our industry, from hardware and transactional sales. And we're looking at budgets from a senior perspective now, $6 million annually, and our senior enterprise doubles that. It's up north of $10 million on an annual basis of what their budgets look like. But bigger style deals like the managed IT and cybersecurity and digital transformation and managed marketing services that we offer allow us to do that.
Your other services outside of print. So, you go back 10 years ago, and that was not a big part of the revenue.
Right.
So it has grown tremendously since then. But if you look at the area that you cover, what percentage of revenue is coming from non-print business?
It's definitely over 50%. The company has made the shift in the last year to be 50% hardware and 50% services, and we'll probably finish in the 60-40 area this year. And my market's very similar to the company averages. We're still moving a ton of hardware as an organization, because when you get into these larger IT and cybersecurity deals, that's part of the network, and there's security and vulnerability associated to that equipment, but it's just bigger fleets that we're going after. So we look at certain style accounts. We don't want to talk to really anybody less than 50 employees from a new account perspective. And when you have 50 employees plus into the hundreds, you're talking about a fleet of equipment that could be 20, 30, 40, 50 plus. So you start to add hardware revenue quickly, which adds maintenance, and it kind of wraps into the whole thing.
I think it was last year, I was talking with Frank, and he was telling me that they had a huge increase in print going out the door from the year before when a lot of people were struggling with that. But you mentioned something. I think a lot of people get fooled by it. They say that hey, if we can just get the printer equipment in there, we're going to go get IT. And for here, it's really the opposite. Let's focus on going in there as a services company. The print will just come with it.
Correct. Yeah, it's coming along with it. And when you go into an organization that's really happy with you, they tend to want to expand with you into other areas. And that's an easy, place for us to expand, and we do a great job at it. We have a world-class service division. If you look at our numbers and our breakdown, we know it really well, and we're seeing, like Frank said a year ago, that business grow just because of the size of IT opportunities that we're into.
Let me ask you this. So you got these 5 basic managed services deliverables.
Yeah.
And print being one of them. You have areas in your territory that are pretty rural.
Yeah.
You also have, I believe, you're downtown Chicago
Correct,
as well.
yeah.
So is there any area that's better than the other area? Like, we're never going to get that account in Peru. Or is that a fantasy or not?
There's some merit to that. I don't think that there's a ton of truth, but I will say that downtown Chicago tends to be a little bit more progressive than anywhere. And as you start to move out into the market, it becomes less progressive. We've changed we have an ICP here, ideal customer profile, that we target. In more of those rural areas, we'll look at a little bit of a bigger employee base, but then if you go back to the customers that we're actually closing, we're in that 50 to 75 range. That's a good portion of it too. So it's a target, it's a focus. Where are you spending a majority of your time and where are you supplementing time? I think it's just a balance, and really working a database. What most sales organizations struggle with is working their CRM to its best capabilities, and I think overall we do a solid job with that.
Well, you got a nice history, so you're looking at data that you built, and you obviously made mistakes along the way, and you correct those mistakes as you go. But I'm thinking of some of these rural areas, where you might have a big manufacturing facility, where if you're just a print dealer in that space, all you're going to do is it might be a big deal, but if you're going in as impact, it could be $100,000 a month just in reoccurring services revenue.
Absolutely, and some of the rural areas, there's not as many competitors. Right.
Well, at your level.
If you have a strong presence there and you're known in the area, it makes it an easier introduction. But I think from a sales perspective, what we've done with our SDR program, that sales developmental piece, with all the different services that we offer, it could be a little bit overwhelming. So we want to bring people in and have them get in a lane and be really focused on what it is, and then grow and expand them from there, instead of coming in as an account executive trying to sell a million different things, right? And not having a good baseline and then feeling like they're drinking from a fire hose on full blast, right? A new job in itself is already challenging enough. Yeah,
well, you guys have a pretty good support mechanism for the reps. I just wanted to share a little bit about that. I think you're making some transitions to that as well.
Yeah.
But if I'm a sales rep and I meet the right profile, come into the account, I'm going to go out there and make calls on C-level executives to try to get appointments and take the company to the next level. But what support do they get? How does that work?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different levels of support, right? You could start with our Impact Leadership Institute, ran by Ashley Carnes and her team, right? There's training just from the beginning, and then there's an 18-month roadmap as an account executive here at Impact. We do have that, as I just alluded to, that sales developmental program, which is that SDR support, which is really getting them focused in understanding how to prospect, and then attending the meetings that they're actually setting up. So as they become more tenured and they do get promoted, we could promote them into an account executive level role, maybe a team lead role, where they can train and coach and develop on how to prospect for individuals. So there's a lot of different pieces there, along with the different levels of management, right? Every region has sales managers, general managers, and regional vice presidents, senior VPs, what we're talking about here. So we have the support mechanism in place. It's just making sure that it fits what your business is trying to accomplish. And I think we've tried in some areas, and we've failed, and we've retooled, and we've adjusted, and I think it's working out really well.
Well, I spoke with Ashley once before, and I think the dedication and the training is probably what sets you apart, because it is very detailed, and it's not Havis Cravis, it's regimented.
Yeah, very structured.
So when a sales rep goes out into an account, and they're doing their daily work, how far along can they go with the customer before they need to bring in additional support to help them?
Yeah, that's great.
Because it seems to me that if you're going through this training, they should be able to get pretty far.
Yeah. So I think just going back to structure overall, what we like to do at the end of every week is plan for the upcoming week, or sometimes plan 2 weeks out. Knowing how sales calendars adjust and change, that could be a little bit challenging. So definitely the week coming up, it depends upon what kind of appointment it is, right? If it's a first appointment with a C-level executive and you're not going to get super technical, between an account executive and a sales management support level, you're covered in our opinion, right? Now, when we bring in those subject matter experts that we call business development specialists that may be focused in IT or focused in cybersecurity, if it's becoming a more targeted conversation, then we'll dictate appropriately. So we want to make sure that we don't have too many resources to make it overwhelming for the customer, but have enough to get us to the next, step, which is really the next appointment to gain further alignment, do additional discovery within the account, and continue to progress, the sales opportunity forward.
How much time would you spend in an account? Because I know you do these fee-based assessments, which is the way you got to do it. So how much time do you spend with an account before the clock starts ticking to get some money from the customer?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's variable. I think overall our sales cycle is, well, I know what it is. It's generally 6 to 9 months, and it depends upon size. But from first engagement to getting that dollar amount or that signed assessment could be a couple months. Okay. Right, and that's from a first appointment. Now, you think about all the prospecting efforts that go into that opportunity just to get it to a first appointment. Sometimes that's months, years, in some cases, depending upon who they're working with, the current partners in place, building that rapport. I mean, we're talking about our average IT deal size is over $1 million, from an overall contractor revenue. So you're talking about heavy investments from the other side, right, and changing their business, right? Everybody needs IT at some level, right? But these are major investments for these organizations. So building those relationships and putting in that rapport on the front end is key. And then long term, as long as you do a great service job, nobody wants to change their IT providers.
No,
right?
you're right.
It's a bigger move than it is wheeling out the copier and wheeling a new one in.
Especially with all the other added services that you can bring to the table. Talk about some of the success stories from some of the reps. So the question I want to ask you is, how many reps do you have that will, and I don't know if you might not want to answer this, but how many reps do you have that'll make over $250,000 a year?
I have quite a few. In my region, there are, just under 50 total account executives. And in sales, it's always that 80-20 rule I think I always fall back to. And that 20% is pretty darn realistic when you ask, for that type of number in our account executives. And some of them aren't the most tenured. Depends upon what experience they've come from. A lot of the account executives that we're hiring now have some type of tech sales experience. We just, want to get them elevated and lifted up and, trained and on the right road. A lot of them can have those C-level conversations. Now we just need to teach them the impact way. Yeah. So we're still seeing it takes time to develop the people overall, but being able to carry a executive level conversation is key to that. So it's not everybody, right? But hopefully as we continue to embark on our journey and where we're trying to climb, it'll become hopefully a 50-50 at some point. And we're looking for the first, $1 million earner, at Impact, which I don't think we're far off from.
How close are you to the $500,000 earner?
We've had plenty of those people, especially in the past, do that. Yeah,
that's pretty amazing.
There's people out there doing that.
Well, it has to give a lot of inspiration to the younger people. Yeah. And I know you guys have a pretty young.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
What's the average age of your team?
My average age, I don't know 100% offhand, but if I had to think about it right now, we're going to be in that early to mid 30s. Wow. Similar to myself. Mid 30s. Have a lot of that. We have some with a lot more tenure, and then we have I take in this SDR program into account. We hire some of those individuals right out of college. Some of them have come out of college and have telemarketing experience, and they come over to us. There's a wide range, but that SDR program tends to be a little bit of the younger part. Like when I started at Impact 14 years ago, 22 years old, we didn't have an SDR program. So you start as an account executive. Basically in a hardware business.
Well, I was talking with Jeff, and we were talking about the biggest assets to people and the cost of the people and all that. But I'm thinking that you really have to have a customer profile nailed down, persona, and you can't waste time. Yeah. Because there's too much resources put into it. So, do you ever get pushback sometimes where it's like, no, let us go here? You're like, no, we can't afford them to as a customer, or maybe they'll explain that the potential's bigger than your experience tells you it probably is.
Yeah, you brought it up 10 years ago when we really, dove face first in from an IT perspective. Impact Networking has always done IT at some level, but it was more of a break-fix model. And at that point, I think 10 years ago we were doing maybe $500,000 a year, and now it's over half of the company's revenue, which is pretty impressive as far as what we're doing. But to that exact point, we had to start somewhere. We started with some of these smaller accounts, and we learned from it, and we grew from it, and we built out our model. Right now, as the MSP that we are, we're in the top 3%, so we don't have a lot of different individuals to turn to get some ideas. So we're learning to a certain extent as we go, but I think we figured it out. But to your question and point around the profile, that's the most important piece. There's only so many hours in the day, and you have to be as focused and structured as possible. And I think that's what a lot of companies, maybe in our industry or just in general from sales, they take that shotgun approach versus a rifle approach, right? And they're spraying all over the place, and they're wasting time with accounts that aren't going to be that fruitful for them. So in the last 24 months, we have spent a great ordeal of time with that data that you were talking about earlier in understanding our customer profile, where we want to spend 80+% of our time and be really, really focused, so we can be as effective as possible.
Well, and you have to have the discipline, number one.
Yeah.
I mean, it blows my mind when I'll hear a substantial dealership that's in IT talking about selling $1,000 service contracts or $1,500 service contracts. I'm like, the worst thing you could do is get successful doing that, and there's no doubt you will, because you got 100 sales reps out there and they'll sell all kinds of $1,000 contracts. The problem is, one day you're going to get one that's $100,000, you're not going to be able to support it. Why don't you focus on getting them that are 10,000 or 15? So
Absolutely.
What's the limit contract for your team?
So we start at 10,000 a month.
So.
It is kind of a floor for us, because when you balance out the program as far as having a VCIO, right, which is a commonly used term, in the IT world and just in our industry in general, that virtual chief information officer, you talk about engineers. We call our service, it's a service desk for us, not a help desk. That's how we refer to it. It's our USO right next door from where we're talking today. When you take that whole combination, right, of salaries and benefits and everything together, that's the minimum that makes sense from a business perspective. So yes, we had to start somewhere, but we learned really quickly where we want to spend our time and energy to give our customer a world-class experience, right? That's our goal, is to deliver world-class service to the organizations, and in order to do that, it's all people, right? And processes and technology that you have built around it. So we want to be as efficient as possible and have the best people and put the best technology in the people's hands so they can drive the business forward for us.
Well, there was a day when somebody told you, Mike, we're not doing nothing for less than 10 grand.
Yeah.
And so how long did it take the team to accept that?
Yeah.
And then what is it today? It's probably not even thought of. They're like, why would I sell anything less than 10?
Yeah. Anytime change for anybody is difficult, right? We like to embrace change here at Impact as much as possible, but you're always going to have those that are like, why are we doing this? And I think as leaders in an organization, you're constantly selling the why, right? And we're all about transparency here at the company, and it's explaining that, what it takes to effectively support a customer. Let's take a comparison of a customer that doesn't fall into that profile and the challenges that we're having and what we're able to not deliver on them because it just doesn't make sense, or what we're burning, from the bottom line just to make them happy, right? I think when they can understand the business and how it functions holistically, then I think you're in a much better scenario. But if you just tell them, hey, we're doing this, and you don't explain it, then those little voices that everybody has, they start to become external, and they all start to chatter around the company, and then that breaks down the culture and deters what you're trying to build.
When do you think you're going to go to 15,000 as a minimum?
We've talked about that, and what we've noticed, I kind of talked to you about our average deal size is over. It's $22,000 a month on an average deal size right now. So it's just naturally happened, right? I think 10 was like that floor, like, hey, we had to get over it, because in 2019, our average deal size was $4,900. Wow. And by the end of it's gonna, more than 4x that here by the end of 2023, which is very impressive from our perspective. So we haven't even had to have that conversation. Nobody's had to really ask. And I think when the AEs see the success that, hey, the $4,000 a month or the $1,000 a month contract takes us just as much effort as the 20,000, and then you look at your paycheck, I think it really,
Well, the problem is
you don't even need to sell it.
You
at
have
that
two
point.
different personas too. It's like, any town in America has a bunch of Ford dealerships. There's probably only one that sells Range Rover, or BMW, or Mercedes. So, some customers just aren't going to be the right fit. That's just the way it is. But it's an amazing success story, and I'm super excited for your growth. And,
Thank you, appreciate that.
You've done some great stuff here at Impact. Frank talks highly of you. What's your biggest hurdle that you see in front of you right now?
Yeah, I would say as you grow, there's always growing pains internally. Continuing to keep, the structure in place and make sure, it's always easy to not look at the blocking and tackling things, when you're having a lot of success. right? The company's growing, a lot of things are going on that are great, but you're not paying attention to the small things that are happening in the background that amount to big things long term. No different than, I'm talking sales pipeline, right? So I think for us, it's just keeping focused on the little things that got us to where we're at today, and that will continue to get us there, along with a lot of the, if you talk to Frank DeGeorge or Patrick Layton or anybody on the operational side of the business, Frank, we've got a lot of systems that need some fine tuning, right, and some adjustments. What got us to be a $200 million company today, is that gonna get us to $500 million, or where do we need to adjust? I think that's the biggest thing. So with growth comes pain, but with growth comes opportunity. So take advantage of the opportunity, have fun, love what you do, and my biggest thing is that if you love what you're doing, you'll never work a day in your life, and that's how I look at it.
And you know what? Everybody watching this knows this: status quo is the killer of all that'll be invented.